Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube video showing you the projects that I made in Fodder School 1. And of course I started off with Tiffany's lessons for October, making these lovely little bits of ephemera with watercolor and gel pen. I found this process to be very relaxing and meditative. Even the fussy cutting was like that. And I ended up making my first batch and then coming back to it later on to make some more just for that meditative process, and also because I didn't want to use any of it up, so I figured that if I made more I'd be more willing to use it. I'm kind of just infatuated with these little bits of ephemera. I love them. Thank you, Tiffany. The next project I managed to complete was for January with Autumn, and the reason I didn't do November and December is because I was in the process of finalizing my own lesson videos and I just didn't have the time. Maybe I'll go back. I hope that I can revisit and do Dee Dee's and Amy's classes. Here's my Gatefold journal that I made in Autumn's classes. And I just really enjoyed the process of creating these little bits to put in the tuck spots and creating the tuck spots out of some transparency that I had stenciled over. I like to put little cards like this as reminders in my junk journals, and I think that's what this one's going to end up being, more of a junk journal versus an art journal for me. In February with Megan, I really enjoyed using my stamps with water-soluble media to create some kind of background images and ephemera to use in these assemblage. And I used some photographs of myself as a kid and maybe one as an adult to create the focal points for these. And I love the way they turned out. I love the messy painted backgrounds and the stitching with my sewing machine, and then the little French knots of embroidery that I added to the center of the flowers. In March with Rebecca, I managed to make a bunch of tissue traps, which were super fun for me. And then I used my foam stamps that I had laying around to create some other fodder. I didn't manage to create Rebecca's project, as I was getting ready to be the teacher for April. But I ended up using a lot of this fodder in some later projects that you'll see. Here's Ulu with a fodder bowl right behind me on the bed as I work at the little desk in my daughter's room to create about a gazillion ATCs to trade during the month of April. And I couldn't really film any of them because I sent pretty much all of them away to my traders. So here's a few still photos to remind you of what they looked like. Here are my collages for the month of May with Laura, and you can see that I used fodder that I made for Laura's classes, but also a lot of the fodder that I had already accumulated, and it all came together really nicely. I love the way these little collages turned out. In June with Tracy, it was really great to have the opportunity to use up some of the piles of fodder that had been accumulating at that point. Creating some master sheets was super fun, and then cutting them down into kindness cards to fodder the world with was even more fun. I sent a batch of my kindness cards down to the cancer hospital where I had been treated for tongue cancer in 2018. In July with Roxanne, I loved creating all of the fodder, the papers with the swatching was so much fun, and then creating the accordion book. I loved this process and created little moths on each of the pages instead of dresses. Here I'm pointing out that I used some transparency that basically was a paint palette, so it has some paint on it that kind of shows through, and then it adds a little shiny background for my cover moths. I didn't use Roxanne's handmade stencils to create the fodder for my accordion book, so I used them instead in some journal pages in this little handmade junk journal. In this spread, I used the stencils with some yellow paint for my background, and then made sure they had yellow paint on both sides to tip them into the journal spread to kind of add an interactive element. In August with Wendy, I really enjoyed creating the hinge bound little art journal that I used to note and memorialize the studies that I've been undertaking about polyvagal theory. And the fabrics that I used were basically just the clean off rags. And in fact, one of the clean off rags was an old napkin that had that kind of crocheted lace trim all around it. And I ended up colorizing that with a few ink sprays and dye sprays so that it would go with the other fabrics that I was using to hinge my book. In September with Kelly, it was playing around with the Traveler's Notebook. I actually have a Traveler's Notebook, but I really don't use it. So this was a great time for me to delve into that and create my own cover for a Traveler's Notebook with sketch paper in it. And I decided that I would use this to organize myself in writing my book. So I've added some tags and some note areas where I can keep myself organized, including a list of the due dates for the batches of pages that I need to turn into the editor. And in the notebook portion, I have another couple of tags that I have organized my thoughts and chapters around. So I think this is really going to come in handy, and of course it was a load of fun to create it. For my stamps following Kelly's lessons, I decided to use photographs of some of the ATCs that I've made in the past as backgrounds for this little kind of goth girl figure that I'd sketched and scanned and then minimized to make it a little bit smaller to fit onto the stamps. And rather than using like antiquing stamp pad, I used just a archival ink in like a raspberry. And for my slides, I didn't have any prepared slides, die cuts, so I kind of just recreated the wheel with what I had, and I used some of the photographs from the book. And the book that I keep referring to is a book called Share Your Joy, all about mixed media mail art, shareable art. All of the projects are things you could put in an envelope and mail to share your joy and make someone else's day. Well, goodbye for now. I'm sure that I will see you in class at some point during Fodder School 2 because I'll be a student there. I wish you guys all the best and happy creating.